Hey, comrades, what's up? Moving on to the New Mutants. Since the X-Men are like supposedly dead, it's time for the New Mutants to step in and take their place or whatever. And then we start with Marvel graphic novel number 4, which just gives all their kind of backstories. We see Moira McTaggart, and this wolf jumps over her, and she's like, "What the blazes?" And then the wolf transforms into Rain, the girl. Remember, we've seen Rain before. Rain Sinclair. She's like the adopted daughter of Moira McTaggart. She's being chased by some awful priest who, well, she's not quite the adopted daughter. She was being watched over by Moira and then this terrible priest, right, in like previous X-Men. But then now he's chasing her with like shotguns and pitchforks and torches, and Moira just picks her up and runs off. We then switch over to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, where Balbia Costa, Roberto, is playing soccer, and his dad and girlfriend are watching, and then these guys like attack him, and then he gets into a fight with them, and then he transforms into like his sunspot stealth and just like screams, throws the guy like across the field, and everyone freaks out and runs away. And the girlfriend, Juvia, I think, or Juliana, Juliana, runs down and holds him and is like crying and stuff. And then we see like a sketchy dude, who we find out is Pierce, the robot from the Hellfire Club, is watching, and he's like, "Oh, I will destroy all of you mutants." And then we switch over to Kentucky, and there's like a coal mine, and this 16-year-old boy is going to work the mines because his dad died, and it's Sam Guthrie, Cannonball. So then there's like a cave-in. He grabs the guy who gets caught in the cave-in, he uses cannonball powers and juts out, and everyone's like, "Phew, that was safe." Then over to Colorado, that's right, Sundance, Colorado, where there's like a mountain lion running up to an Indian girl who's like meditating in like a snow-capped mountain, and she hugs him, and then he's like, "Oh, there's a human here," and "Oh, it's Black Eagle, her grandfather, hooray." And this is Danny Moonstar. She can project things in people's minds or whatever, so she foresees her grandfather's death, just like she did her parents' death. She cries, and grandfather Black Eagle is like, "You're gonna go stay with Professor X. He's a friend. He's like a blood brother of your parents. They served in like Vietnam together, and make sure you're taken care of." And then we get this like funny shot where Pierce is looking. It's Pierce, right? The robot guy. He's looking at a picture. He's looking at these things, trying to like triangulate where these people are. And then instead of saying Colorado, it says Wyoming. But whatever. He's kidnapped Tessa, who's a member of the Hellfire Club, and she's yelling at him. And he's like, "You're a mutant too. I'm going to get you killed." Later that evening, Danny wakes up because grandfather she got a premonition, and she goes, and he's been killed, just like her vision said, and she like screams in the heavens. Next, we head over to the X Mansion, and with Rain and Sean. Sean is from the Fantastic Four thing we talked about before. She becomes Karma. She can like possess people. She had to kill her twin brother. I thought it was older brother, but she talks about twin brother here multiple times, so I just misread it. Moira is also there. They're doing tests, talking about her powers. We see that her power is to possess people, just like, in case you didn't read that Fantastic Four book, that random one. Rain transforms into like a half wolf. They talk. They like calm everybody down. There's like more chit chat. Professor X is having like a real struggle session with Moira about teaching more mutants and like how they're just gonna die and how he can't take it anymore and all this stuff. And finally, Moira like talks him into it. She then brings forth a letter, and it's the letter Black Eagle sent to Professor X about Danny, and then they get this like scene of Black Eagle. I don't know why Sean and Rain are pulled in here, but it's like it's Vietnam when Professor X was there with Danny's dad, and then Sean like freaks out because she's seeing all this stuff, and then we switch back over to like Colorado. Oh, no. They're out in Colorado when this happens. They get this vision and hear all this stuff. And so then we see Danny running away from these like guys who killed her grandfather, and then her mountain lion goes to like help her, and then he dies unceremoniously. Then she gets grabbed up by one of these goons, and like the pink robot goons. But then Sean takes control of one of them, and then they start fighting. And then the girls get into like a big discussion about Professor X and what they're going to do. And Danny keeps wanting to kill the guy who like nabbed her up. Professor X keeps stopping her, being like, "That's not the way." Meanwhile, a bit later down in Rio de Janeiro, we have Danny and Sean just like hanging out talking with Moira in the room, while Rain and Professor X went to Kentucky. They're here to get Roberto and help him out. So they get the federales come in, they bust him up. Sean takes possession of one of them so that her handcuffs aren't all the way on, and then has him like start fighting. Moira's like, "Hey, I'll take care of this. You guys figure it out. Go find Roberto and help him out." So later that evening, they find Roberto. He's running around. Somehow he ends up in like this warehouse getting beat up by one of these like goons, Pierce's goons, and Juliana's there, and they're chit-chatting in Portuguese. And then Roberto's gonna like fight them with his sunspot powers, but then it like runs out because he needs sunlight to charge up. That comes up much later. We hear them talking about Wolverine killing them and turn them into androids, which is something we got previously. So Danny uses that to like send the projection of Wolverine attacking them. They all freak out. Then Danny jumps in. Sean takes over a guy, and they're going to help Roberto. And Roberto like flips out and like knocks Sean down. So that releases the guy who is helping him out. And so he starts firing at people. And then projections of Wolverine get crazy. And Juliana jumps in the way of a bullet and takes one and dies. So super tragic there. He loses his cute like 13-year-old girlfriend. These kids are all super young. Sean's like 19, but I think Sam is 16. Rain's 14. I think no, she might be 12. She's young, maybe 10. She's really young. Roberto is like 13, I think. And then Danny's like 14. Like these are like little kids, like teenagers. Anyway, and they look the part. It's good as well. I mean, animated, well drawn. Anyway, so they argue, but then finally Roberto's like, "Fine, I'll come with you," but I'm super sad. Meanwhile, out in Kentucky, like I said, Xavier and Rain are looking for Sam. When Sam hits them, knocks Rain jumps out as a wolf and goes and hides, and Professor X gets knocked unconscious. Sam pulls him out, and then some of other Pierce's goons come along and. Sam apparently got recruited to Pierce's organization because he's a country bumpkin and doesn't know any better. So Rain tracks him down to like this concentration-looking camp in the middle of like Kentucky, this huge like thing that is completely taken over by Pierce and his goons. They have Tessa and Xavier there. They're all chained up and stuff. So Rain's like, "Oh no, what am I gonna do?" And then we find out that Danny can like talk to animals with her part of her mutant powers, and so she can talk to Rain in her head, which that's fun. And so everyone's caught up, and then it's time. And then I guess Sam sees Rain and goes to hit her, but he's really bad at his powers. And then Danny gets him to think he's like the world's collapsing on top of him, like he's in a mine again. So he blasts through the building, and then the fight begins, and they fight. And then Sam comes by again and gets messed up, and then Sean can't take possession of his mind because she's not strong enough or whatever. Then everyone breaks into like Pierce's room. They go to fight Pierce, but he's like immune to some of their powers, and he beats the shit out of Rain. So then Sunspot comes to like fight Pierce because he can actually fight him because he's got his thing. But then Guthrie hits him from behind, and then Sean comes in to try to possess, but she can't because he's an android or something. And then this whole time, Rain like wakes back up and like undoes the psychic dampener on Xavier. So then Xavier's able to like get into Pierce's brain. And then after that, Sean's able to like take possession of him so that he releases like Tessa. And then Charles and Tessa have a conversation about what to do with Pierce. And Tessa's like, "We got this." And he's like, "Yeah, it's probably the best decision. You keep going." And then Sam's pretty beat Rain's pretty beat the shit out of. So Xavier's like, "We just got to go and get her to a hospital." So they head out, and then sometime later, they're all back at the manor. We see a picture of like the original X-Men, then the Uncanny X-Men, and then we get the New Mutants. And we get like topless Danny, which is interesting. Because most importantly, she's a child, but secondarily important is she's not like attractive in this drawings at all. So it's like, ugh, what? And she's like 14. Gross. Like, what are you doing? You dirty Marvel Comics. Anyway, all the kids gather together. They got their New Mutants uniforms on, and then Danny like sasses Professor because she's wearing like a turquoise belt, which I don't even know if that's a Cheyenne thing, which is in Wyoming, and she was supposedly in Colorado. I don't know. The whole thing doesn't make any sense. Anyway, but yeah, the turquoise is like a Arizona thing. It's like a Navajo thing, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, maybe it's both. I'm not like an indigenous person expert or whatnot. But Sam Guthrie Cannonball knocks on the door. He comes in. Him and Roberto like argue for like 2 seconds, and then they shake hands, and everyone's going to be friends again. And then Professor X looks on very creepily. Not really well drawn comic, to be completely honest. Like, it's fine. But anyway, back to like normal Marvel style here. We hit New Mutants #1. Yes. So again, we get reintroduced to everybody because it's assuming you did not read that last ridiculous thing. So Sean's getting a haircut by Stevie because she's got like crazy old woman Vietnamese hair, even though she's only 19. So she's going to like style it up so Sean can look pretty and whatnot. Roberto is being very charming with everybody. And then accidentally everyone's joking around having a good time, but then Danny's powers go loose and we see like the death of her. We get like the backstory that, just in case, because if you didn't read that comic, you have no idea what's going on, but we see like the monsters and the possession and the people dying and all that stuff. And then Sean like flips out and goes to like kill Danny for doing this. And Roberto has to like slap the bitch to make her like calm down a little bit. And then everyone leaves. And Sean stays with Stevie to comfort her. Danny like wanders through the mansion, finds like Kitty's room, finds Storm's room, starts watering plants. And then Charles summons everybody to come to the danger room. So meanwhile, back in good old jolly old London, we have Moira McTaggart with Ileana, and they're visiting Gabrielle Haller. And if you remember Gabrielle Haller, she's that Jewess that Magneto and Professor X like saved like a long time ago in like one of his like recanting recollections. And she's concerned because her son is a mutant and she doesn't know what to do with him because he's autistic and he has some crazy mutant powers and whatnot. And then Moira keeps being like, you need to talk to Charles about this. And she's like, I can't. It's his son. Dun, dun, dun. That doesn't come up for a while, but that's a very big deal. Okay, so back at the expansion. We learn about the Danger Room. They're going to go through the Danger Room. He shows them all how the Danger Room works and how it's fascinating and fun and stuff. And then we get the typical like X-Men thing when people show up, you have to like get across the room. Sam can't do it. Rain can't do it. Bobby can't do it. Sean can't do it. And then finally it's Danny's turn, but she's freaking out because she's concerned about people dying and like her powers and what she did to Sean, and so she like freaks out and runs away. Rain tracks her down and is like, you smell nice, and it's like, ooh, what's going on here? Don't worry, they don't turn him gay until like modern day, but they're just like super best friends. Back when women could be friends, right? You can be friends with somebody of the same gender and not want to fuck them. Anyway, so they chit chat for a while. Danny's like, you know, you need to be forgiven. And she tells like her backstory from the New Mutants thing. And then finally Stevie rolls up, honks the horn. It's time to go to the mall and do mall stuff because teenagers. And so Rain jumps in, and then we find out they're being followed by some goons of Henry Peter Gyrick, who is the new bad guy when it comes to like Sentinels. Meanwhile, Danny goes back to the Danger Room and she's like, I'm going to do this. And so she activates the whole program, gets in there, starts getting through pretty decently, gets zapped a little bit. And then some mysterious figure like unlocks like the Danger Room's like not doing real harm stuff. And dun, dun, dun. Uh-oh. Danny's in a lot of trouble. Which leads us into episode. Issue number 2. Sorry. Opening it up. All right. Issue number 2, which has the Sentinels on the cover. So clearly we get Sentinels. So Danny's running away from in the Danger Room. She's slip and slide, and there's monsters everywhere. She climbs up. She sees like a big like brood monster alien, and then she falls from this cliff and crashes and passes out. Meanwhile, at the mall, the kids are getting like ice cream and stuff. Stevie wanders off to like take a phone call or make a phone call, and they run into some like townies who call them out for being the riches. It's so good. And then there's like this girl who's like, Rain, your hair's really pretty. I like it. And then they start talking because she's one of the townies. The other townies like accept her. Oh, here we go. So yeah, Rain is 14, Robert is 13, Sam is 16, and Sean is 19. So I don't know how old Danny is at this point. Anyway, then we see Gyrick and Sebastian Shaw watching, and we learn that there's this Project Wide Awake, which involves the Sentinels, and it's like monitoring mutants and taking care of them and getting rid of the mutant threat in America and like around the world. And the whole time Sean's like, I'm going to so take advantage of this shit ass system. And they talk about Robert Berto a little bit because of his like public spectacle when he became a mutant. In front of everybody, but no one else there's like record of. But Sean's just like thinking about this whole thing. He's like, oh yeah, I already learned all this stuff from the father of, because his dad is a member of the Hellfire Club because he's super rich, like Brazilian guy. Anyway, he also thinks about how Donald Pierce like went crazy and wanted to destroy all mutants and how to take care of that. And he thinks about how Gyrick's going to underestimate Xavier and that's going to fuck him over. But he'll still take advantage of it and what he wants to do is get these kids turned against like humanity so that he can like go swing it, like kill Xavier and then come in and be like their savior and they'll join the Hellfire Club or join like what's her fucking name? Emma Frost's like Boston school, the Hellfire School or Hellions. I think they're called the Hellions. Anyway, meanwhile, Stevie is making a phone call. And she gets like picked up from behind and it's some guy and he's like, you got to trust me. I'm on your side. And it's like, sure. That sounds good. And hey, it's Michael Rossi. He's a colonel in the Air Force. He's like an old lover of Carol Danvers and like a friend of Xavier. He's been in these comics a couple different times. He's wearing some like really fancy, weird looking costume. But anyway, they have a conversation about how they're all in trouble. The government's trying to do stuff and that they got to protect the kids. Meanwhile, the feds come in to like arrest the kids. The townies like sass them and like whatnot. But then Sean's like, I know something's wrong because when I was in Vietnam, the police were bad. These people are clearly bad. So he's like, Roberta, let's just follow them. She's being very irresponsible. She's like, all right, let's kind of see what's going on and then we'll kind of go from there. So then, of course, Michael Rossi has no cares in the world, so he starts just like opening fire against these feds like in a public parking space. And so then Cannonball like blasts a car and he seemingly kills a guy, but probably not. And then Roberto like blows up another car with his powers. And then Sean takes over the mind of another guy and they're just beating the shit out of these feds, right? Because Rain's got the other one and they got him like all pinned down and Michael's going to like arrest them. Then dun, dun, dun. Uh-oh. Gyrick's been watching this whole thing and now it's time. The Sentinels come in and they're like, oh, the Sentinels. And Michael starts just firing like bullets at him. And it's like fucking Sentinels, bro. So he gets gas and then Cannonball knocks him completely out of the roof. There's like more Sentinels around. Robert goes out to like fight him and he jumps out like a window and like falls to like his death, except that he's like sunspot, so he's okay. And then Guthrie goes to like hit that Sentinel who's chasing after Roberto, and then we see he gets iced and then grabbed, and then Sean uses her power on Sam to take over his mind and have him activate his power, but she's like completely entranced. Normally she can possess people and control herself, but in this situation she cannot. And then one of the Sentinels like blasts a hole right near where Sean's at, and Rain's like, "Oh no, what are we gonna do?" And so she goes to like do something. She doesn't do much, and then Sunspot gets back up, and then Michael Ross starts shooting his pistol at him again, and Guthrie wakes up because he's like melted out of the ice cap, and he's like way above the earth, and he's like, "All right, fuck." So he just turns around and like uses his power to smash the Sentinel back into like the ground against the other Sentinel, killing them both. So they kill all the Sentinels. Good job, New Mutants. At this point, Sean has possessed this guy, John Ogilvie, and he's confessing everything about Henry Peter Gyrick, about the Sentinels, everything that's going on. And this other, like, Stady or Fetty is, like, listening to him and stuff. And then they get into, like, a weird discussion in the car where Karma/Sean is talking about, like, is this right? Should I really be doing this? Is the guy really a criminal? Are we criminals? And Michael Rossini are going back and forth. And he's like, there's somebody far worse than this guy. Like, you got to protect yourself, make sure you're doing okay. And so, like, very philosophical and puts a lot of doubt into, like, Sean's like, because she doesn't want to be like a superhero, and the only reason she kind of came along is because Professor X essentially promised to teach her and help her train her and control her powers, and also like pay her like a living wage to like help take care of the other kids and be like an assistant teacher or whatever, because she's like actually an adult, and to like do stuff around the mansion so that she can support her family. Anyway, so let's see, somber a half hour. Okay, so half an hour later, they all return to the mansion, and they find Danny in the danger room, and she's like, "Oh, I woke up," and she's like, "I don't know what happened. This whole thing, the sequence, blah 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 blah." And Stevie's like, So only 3 people that can unlock like the danger protocols inside the danger room: me, Professor X, and Moira. And I was gone, and Moira McTaggart's in London, so it's got to be Professor X. And then we see the picture. The last panel we get in the issue number 2 is Professor X trying to fight off the Brood like transformation, as like we see like a Brood in his mind like cackling or whatever. All right, moving on to, issue number 3 of the New Mutants. We pick up with Danny. She's seeing visions of the Brood. Obviously, Professor X is someone involved in this. And then she gets attacked by a nightmare creature. She runs around, sees Julia, who had already killed Roberto, sees the dead Sean, sees Sam Guthrie buried, sees Rain burned at the stake, and freaks out some more. Then the nightmare creature has like a mask. She tears it off, and it's the bear! Oh, that's how her parents got killed, remember? She screams and then wakes up. And Roberto and Sam come rushing in, checking to see if she's okay. The rest of the mutants come in along with Professor X, and well, except for Sean. And then they're talking to her, and he seems to think that she's, it's like, oh, you're probably just having nightmares, you're probably stressed, yada yada yada. And then so they all leave, and she's like, no, I know what I saw. I definitely saw it. And then she checks her knife that she stabbed the bear with, and it's covered in blood. So then she's like, I gotta tell Professor X. And so she runs down to his room, and she overhears him talking to Moira, talking about how she's this paranoid schizophrenic. And then we switch over to Scotland, and Moira is like, the fuck are you talking about? Of course she's not. She has no prior mental history. This is not something that just happens. Like, you use like a mind check and make sure before you call me back with any of that bullshit. She hangs up, and she's like super stressed out. And then Sean comes in. Not Sean, but Sean Cassidy, the old Irish banshee who's now living with her. And he's like rubbing her back and talking about kids and her kid and having kids. And he's like, we should get married and have kids. And she's like, no, I can't do it. He's like, come on, we'll deal with it then. And then he's going for a walk at dawn. And he sees Ileana doing some sort of like prayer thing. Walks up to her. They chit chat about that, about Aurora teaching her to pray and how it's Kitty's birthday today. Then we head back over to the X Mansion. We get some Danny swimming naked in the pool, and Sean talking to her, and they're talking about how it's, this isn't cold. This is nothing like Colorado. And Sean's like, I'm fucking cold, yo. Like, this is crazy. Heading into the danger room, we have Sam Guthrie. He's just practicing. Professor X is thinking about stuff. He's got like a headache or something. Then Sam's taking a shower, shaving himself, and then he has like, he like passes out for a second, wakes up, and he sees this sign on, like, with the, he sees a note to him from Sean, who possessed his mind to use the shaving cream to write it. And so he's like super pissed. He runs over to the boathouse where all the rest of the New Mutants are, and like yells at her. And then they're like chit-chatting, and they're like, something's wrong with Professor X. I feel like we need to be careful, and yada yada. And Sam's like, well, until you got proof, I don't believe it. And then he like walks back out the boathouse and is like, shit, and comes back in. And they're like, what's going on? And he shows them, and it's like this crazy alien landscape with like a castle in the distance. And Danny's like, told you so. Let's go down here. It's like, what's down here? It's like, oh, there's tunnels all over the property and whatnot. So they head down, and then immediately Danny gets picked up by a brood. And Sean tries to like possess its mind, but then she kind of goes crazy. Not too crazy. She just gets like a crazy headache. And so they fight and they kill the brood. And it's like, oh, everything's okay. But there's this crazy tunnel system like in the brood homeworld. So they head down there. Roberto gets grabbed up by the wall. Another brood comes, grabs Danny, and runs off. And there's all these other monsters around. So the kids got to fight that. Danny wakes up. She's in the mansion, and there's like the brood queen talking about how she's going to impregnate. She's going to put eggs in all her friends to make more queens, and it's going to be glorious and all this stuff. When Roberto and Sam come bashing into the room to beat up the brood. Sean then tries to possess the creature again, but then this time it kind of takes over her mind. And so she attacks Roberto, who knocks her out real good. And then Sam, Rain, and Roberto are going to start fighting the brood. And then Danny's like, no, it's all in my head. You got to knock me out. So Sam does. He uses his cannon powers to go fly at Danny and give her a good whack in the jaw, knocking her out, which it works. It shuts everything down because she was like reflecting something like the fear into like the whole place and everything and yada yada. And later on, she's at the at the porch just looking at the stars. And Roberto comes up to talk to her, and she's like, I don't know, maybe it's better if I left. Like I feel weak. Like I don't know what to do. And he's like, no, we're all a team. We're all family. And they hug it out and like watch stars fall and stuff. And then the issue ends with Sam being like, hey guys, you ready to go watch Magnum PI? Yep. Which leads us directly into Uncanny X-Men 167, which picks up with the kids watching Magnum PI in the mansion, and they're drawn like 1,000 times better in Uncanny X-Men than they're drawn in New Mutants. New Mutants, they all look kind of like funky and weird, but in this, like Sean actually looks like pretty, as well as like the rest of them. They look like decent human beings and not like, I don't know, gross children like they do in the New Mutants. Anyway, so then they're watching Magnum PI, and the X-Men come bursting in, specifically Colossus, Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and Cyclops. And they start fighting, and Cyclops is like, we had to do this like real quick and fast. I wish I didn't have to do this to these kids or whatever. And then we see Kitty. She has some sort of like Starjammer gun, and she's sneaking in the upper floors. And so we get some battles. We get some like shonen anime battles between like everybody. Wolverine's able to like completely dismiss Sean's power, which she's like, holy fuck, I've never seen him really do that. Meanwhile, Kitty gets up to Professor X. He's like sitting there, and then she's like, I need to go up there and shoot him right away. And then she doesn't do that. Instead, she walks up and starts chit-chatting, and she's like, oh, fuck. Because Professor X is like, ooh, I'm possessed. Heading back downstairs, the X-Men are mopping the floors with the New Mutants when Kitty gets like tossed through the door and the banister to like crash into the ground. And then Professor X comes wandering out, and he starts metamorphosizing, and he metamorphizes into a brood. And it's like, ooh. And then the X-Men start fighting the brood queen. Cyclops blasts her, so she goes like way the fucking far out there. And then where Colossus previously had gotten knocked out here by Sam Guthrie, and so they start fighting. But the brood like has the psychic powers of Professor X, so she's able to like predict movements and do all this stuff. Sean, once again, because she didn't learn her lesson in New Mutants, that or they just didn't communicate well between the two publishing books, tries to possess the brood. It doesn't go too well for her. And then the brood queen's like, oh, I'm pretty injured. That guy cut me up pretty good. I'm going to get out of here and I'll heal later. And as she's going, Binary shows up. Binary, if you've forgotten, is Miss Marvel. Or Carol Danvers, who is now like has the power of a star because of like mutations the brood gave her, and she just come and like whacks the shit out of the brood queen, and then Storm freezes the brood queen with her wind magic, and so then Wolverine's like, all right, I got this, and he's about to go up and like stab the shit out of the brood to kill Professor X for good. And then Cyclops is like, hold on. He's talking. And he's like, oh, I'm totally transformed. My brain's almost gone. Please kill me. And then Wolverine's like, well, you heard the man. Oh, glorious. And then Cyclops is like, no, I lost Jean this way. We're going to give this a shot. Anyone got any objections? And Wolverine's like, yes, lots. And Storm's like, dead. Anyways, they take the professor up to the Starjammer, and the little machine bug medic and Moira are there, and they're working. They've just figured out that like, okay, so they have some tissue samples of Professor X of Charles, so they're going to try to make a clone and then move the brain over to the clone and then kill the brood. And they're like, okay, we'll give it a shot. And then the bug's like, the chances are really low. And they're like, okie dokie. So elsewhere, Storm is standing watching Colossus and Ileana wait for Kitty to wake up, and we get a very oddly drawn Ileana, to be completely honest. Like, I've never seen her drawn like this. even when she was like a little girl. So it's very confusing. Anyway, and then Storm's like, I feel very alone here on Earth. I'm very concerned. So she goes out and she finds Nightcrawler watching the New Mutants just be like, wow, the stars. Wow, we're in a spaceship. Wow, this is so cool. And they chit-chat and he flatters her and all this fun stuff. And then we switch over to Cyclops and Christopher Summers, Corsair. And they like hug it out. And Corsair's like, hey, your parents... or your mother's parents are dead, but mine are still alive. We should go hang out with them if you want. Bring Alex along. And he's like, you bet. So they hug it out. And at that point, Corsair hears from what's his name, Raza, and he's like, hey, Gladiator's here to see the Empress. And he's like, I thought you said you never fucking come back on my ship unless you were destroying it. And then Gladiator demands to see the Empress. And he's like, how about you fucking ask politely, sir? And then Raza's like, come on, man, stop being such an asshole. And he's like, oh. And he's like, fine, may I please see the princess or the empress? And Lilandria is like thinking about the whole circumstance, how Deathbird has the Empire and what she's supposed to do next. And then Gladiator walks in and is like, Magistrix. The Deathbird's in charge. She's crazy, all this other stuff. He also mentions that he ran into Fantastic Four and found out that they like resurrected Galactus. And Lilandria is like, holy shit, those dumb motherfuckers. So she does some like astral projection into like Reed Richards' room and get a nice back shot of Sue naked. And she's like, you are fools and like you better be careful because Galactus is a monster, and if you're going to join like the cosmic affairs of like the universes, you got to like play ball or you're going to get fucked. And she comes back in and the Gladiator's like, I hope you told her like sufficiently. I know Corsair's like, hope you shut them up sufficiently. And she's like, yeah, not that I can do anything about it right now since I don't have an empire. And then Professor X rolls out and he's okay. Wow, they did it. It worked. And then he stands up. Look, I can stand too, but he really can't because physically he's in a clone body. So his body is great because the whole thing is with his legs is they got crushed in like Nam or whatever. But he's got a mental block because he was like, it was so painful that he completely blocked off all the nerves in his legs. So now that he's like transported bodies, that like his mental powers are strong, that they're still sitting in there. And Lilandria's like, I'm going to stay with you and make sure you can do this. And then Moira teases him too and is like, yeah, and if that doesn't work, I'll slap the shit out of you. And finally Charles introduces the New Mutants to the rest of the X-Men and is like, they'll be joining you, Kitty Pryde, and the New Mutants. And she's like, Nani desu ka? Which takes us to the best start of an issue ever in Uncanny X-Men 168, which is literally Professor X, what does she say? Professor Xavier is a jerk. And then she like storms off into the winter. And her and Ileana are like chit-chatting, talking about going to dance class and stuff. And Ileana's like, is it really that bad? Like, come on. And then they are being watched by some mysterious creature. Dun, dun, dun. Wolverine then, we switch to Wolverine, who's talking to Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler's going to drop the girls off at the dance class with Stevie. And also Wolverine's like, hey, I'm headed to Canada. I got some shit I got to take care of. And so Nightcrawler's like, hey, I'll drop you off at the airport if you don't mind coming with us. And he's like, yeah, sounds good, bro. And then they chit-chat a bit about how they're homies and super bros and whatnot. And then they get into an argument about Kitty being in the X-Men or not. And Wolverine is like, hey, man, there's younger people than her who've been like midshipmen or like parts of armies and all this stuff. So like, and she's handled better than any of us. And she's doing great. And Nightcrawler's like, well, I don't know. I'm kind of on both ends of the spectrum here. Anyway, so then we get some shots of Professor X just like really struggling and him and Lilandra's like love. And she talks about how she needs to head back to the Empire to like dethrone Deathbird. And she wants him to go with her. He wants her to stay, but they both have responsibilities. So neither of them can do either of those things. And then we see that strange creature watching over them. Over with Stevie Hunter at the dance studio, Kitty is like completely distracted, and Stevie's like, hey, you better shit the fuck up and start forcing yourself. And they get into like an argument, and then like Kitty like admits that she just like doesn't want to leave the X-Men and they're her family, and she's just super concerned. And Stevie's like, how about you stop being such a cunt about it and just like talk and try to find a way to convince him instead of just like complaining and screaming all the time. And then Kitty's like, yeah, that's a good point. We then head over to Storm. She's naked and trying to like enjoy the elements and whatnot, but they're rejecting her because she killed, right? And that was like her big thing. And then we get like a montage of Kitty trying to like sweeten or trying to talk Professor X into letting her stay on the X-Men. She's like playing games. She's like helping out. She's having like logical arguments and like this sexy schoolgirl outfit. And then and she's trying to be like a flatterer and all that stuff. And he keeps like, nope. Meanwhile, Cyclops heads over to Florida while his dad's like taking care of some other random bullshit before they go see grandparents. And of course he's here to see dun dun dun. It's Lee. You remember Lee? Lee's his like somewhat lover after Jean Grey. She's like the blonde bombshell who like a captain of a ship and like a tough broad and like a tomboy. Anyway, she grew her hair out. and he likes it. And then they're talking about stuff, and she's like, I don't know if I can be a part of your world. It's kind of crazy, and yada yada. And he starts getting concerned, and maybe I should just go. And she's like, hey, motherfucker, just like stay here and bang me first, and then we can like figure it out from there. At least we can have some fun together for a little bit of time. Yeah, boy. Guess who else gets laid? That's right, Nightcrawler. So he's hiding out in Amanda Sefton's apartment, and when she gets back, it's all candled up and presents, and he's like, yo, girl, what's up? So they bang. Back at Xavier's school, Kitty is just catching up on all the schoolwork she missed for the last months or whatever that they were gone. Peter and Ileana are going to go cut down like a tree or something, and she's like, no, I got to stay here and keep doing this. And then she notices like some strange creature in the basement, so she goes to check it out, and she contacts Professor X because she finds like a cable that's been bitten into, and he's like, well, let me call the other X-Men, and she's like, I'll take care of it. And she has this whole conversation where she's not wearing her like Sprite outfit, she's wearing like her original X-Men outfit, which is just like the New Mutants, and she's like, I don't know if I like this, it kind of bothers me, but it'll do. And then she runs into Dun Dun Dun, the dragon, Lucky. That's right, from the Brood Planet. Oh, that's great. And from the story she told. And it's like, yay, dragon. And they hug, and they're super best friends forever. Oh, uh-oh. But then there's those crazy, what are they called? Oh, Sidrian Hunters, the ones that chase Corsair, Scott, and Storm at the beginning of this whole, like, fucking fiasco, right? So apparently there's, like, a nest here. And then Kitty starts getting, like, psionic talking to by, like, Lockheed the dragon. I don't think they call him Lockheed yet, but that's what I'm going to call him because that's his name. And so she gets blasted a little bit, and she can't use her powers. And then Lockheed's like blasting him with fire, and then she's like using the stuff that like Wolverine taught her to like ninja to samurai, like beat the shit out of a couple of these things. She gets like 2 down, blasts him real good, and then she's about to get blasted with the third one when Colossus shows up and like takes the blast and just beats the shit out of it. And then they hug it out. And then they find Lockheed, and he had taken off, and she's like, where'd you go, you sassy dragon? And then they look behind him, and there's like a whole nest with like thousands of these eggs. Did they say thousands or hundreds? Yep, said thousands of these eggs for these Sidrian hunters just hanging out in this room, and he had like eaten all the eggs and burned all the rest of them to a crisp. And she's like, you naughty dragon. Anyway, so then they report back to Professor X and tell him everything, and he's like, oh, that's good. I'm glad we figured that out before it got like too crazy. Oh, she does call him Lockheed. And then he's like, all right, well, the dragon can stay. I don't know what else to do with him. I mean, we did destroy his homeworld, and now he's stuck here with us. And then they joke around about him eating Professor X. And then he's like, look, I've never seen you like in action before, and like you did a really great job, and I'm very impressed. And like you can be like a probationary member of the X-Men, but you're still gonna like study and hang out with the New Mutants, and everything else you do because you know you're like their age. You gotta focus on school, but like if time it permits, you may go out and do stuff with them with the X-Men as well. And she's like, hooray, everyone wins. And a little epilogue we get for this is in Anchorage, Alaska, the Summers brothers and their dad finally land to go. And Scott's all tanned up, and he's got like a shit-eating grin because he was banging out Lee all night before they came up here. And Alex calls him out on it. And then they meet this woman named Madeline Pryor, who is going to take the boys to see the grandparents. And Scott's like, holy shit, it looks exactly like Jean Grey. Dun, dun, dun. And that's the end of this arc. So as part of this arc in the batch of things that I have, they have X-Men God Loves, Man Kills, but I'm just going to do a separate video for that. It's pretty intense. So yeah, join me in a couple weeks and we'll get to that. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.